So, incredible edible Toblerone. Let me see what I can do with this. That's what it is. It's a Trojan horse of food to change the future. I really think those people that are articulate and informed will find a way out of this, one way or another. They'll buy the way out of it, they'll move the way out of it, they'll have other people doing stuff. But actually, for me, this is about how do we make sure that every single member in our society has got the right to a decent future for them and their kids. How do we really embrace those people who just have never been engaged before, the really challenging members of our community, who've got the greatest need in many respects? How do we do it? You've got to be careful about language. Language makes or breaks a movement. And that's why we talk about the Trojan horse of food. This, by the way, is the lock in Tottenham. It's not the lock in Tottenham, it's the canal in Tottenham. What am I talking about? So, what we did, a bit naughty, but anyway, these were put in by the Tottenham in Bloom group, who we love now and we deeply embrace, and they're getting used to us, and that's fine. But we kind of took them over. Because the key to this is just being a little bit naughty on occasions, because it attracts publicity, and then you can start telling your story, and that's great. So we started growing maize, as you can see, and we grew chard, and we grew edible flowers, and we grew strawberries, and we did all these things. And the whole of this canal now is full of food. And the great thing is, because each plate spins and works off each other, we did that in the community. So what happens is boaters come up here, they moor up, and they help themselves to lettuce, or watercress, or what the heck it is, and they go back in. And then the word goes on the boating community, and more people come up. So that starts to influence the economy plate, because you've got more people visiting Toblerone. And the really interesting thing about this is, it took people 2 years to get the idea of helping themselves to food that they didn't plant. It's really quite interesting, because this is about sharing. Many people in this room remember scrumping, remember blackberry picking and all that stuff. We didn't say, oh gosh, I wonder who owns that blackberry bush, whether I should actually pick anything. But we just did it, didn't we? Because it was food that we shared. Now, it's taken 2 years for people to realise they're not going to get shot, despite we always keep telling them, no, it's for you to do. The only thing we ask is when you pick, if you pick the last leaf, you replant. That's all you've got to do. So there's Toblerone. It's 17,000 people. It's between Manchester and Leeds. It's windswept valleys. When I say 15 allotments, I mean in total, that's it. And I'm not a big allotment fan, I have to tell you. I'm definitely into community land growing, but I'm not a big fan of allotments and all the weird and wonderful things that you can't do on them and what you have to do on them. And for me, it's all about making sure that you've got enough land for everybody to grow on, not just that that's designated by law. We've got back-to-back housing, but we've also got some quite well-off people up on the tops. We've got very few farmers, although we do have one organic farmer who I'll speak of later, who's a great champion. He's a lovely man. We've got an indoor market and an outdoor market that's dying on its feet, or was dying on its feet, so we need to do something about that. And then we've got schools. So here's the model of the 3 spinning plates, and it's just about, you can define it in any other way. We started with a community plate in Tottenham because we wanted something that to point at. You've got to have stuff to point at, as you'll know from the stuff that you're actually doing. You can't theorise about this. They need to be in your face, in front of shops, in community spaces, whatever it is, and then people start talking about stuff, and I'll show you some examples of what we're doing. But we have a parallel exercise going on in York with Incredible Edible York, and also in Granada in Spain. There's a link of the same business in Granada and York, that's why that's happening. And they're starting with the business plate. They're starting with the business plate in Granada because the experience in Spain around community growing doesn't sit well with the post-Franco era. It just doesn't sit well. You wouldn't start with that one. You wouldn't get anywhere with it. But with the business plate, thinking about how you connect with those fabulous farmers all around the city of Granada, and how you bring that into the town, and how you grow on the tops, and how you grow vertically, and whatever it is we're experimenting with, that's where you'll start. Other places will start with a learning plate. It doesn't matter as long as you're trying to spin all 3 plates together. So, let's have a quick look at community. I'm going to sit down here for a minute, because I make a better door than a window, is that what they say? Anyway, well, they might do in my part of the world, anyway. For the first 3 months, we did seed swaps, we did propaganda gardens, that was about sharing food. Everybody's done that, there's no big deal about it. But then what was important was to think through the politics of this. Because the way to do this is not to go capping down and ask anybody for money. It's a big no-no, isn't it? I mean, because then they feel they've got some sort of, like, you know, control over you, and then you've got to abide by their rules and their grants, and you've got no moral high ground, and you're a victim because you have to wait for somebody else to tell you. That's not where we're coming from. So we did what we could do that wasn't going to cost us anything whatsoever. And we did a lot that didn't cost us anything whatsoever. The one thing I did do, however, was I did gate crash a meeting of senior council officials when they happened to be having lunch in Todmorden, because I happened to find out that they were doing an away day. And I said to them, look guys, this is what we want to do, and this is what we're going to do. And I absolutely promise you, we are not going to ask this council for one thing until we've absolutely exhausted all our own resources. And at that point, I'll ask you. And they loved it. Because, you know, whatever you think, and I used to be a leader of a council, people do not get into that business because they want to say no all their life. It's just that it can be really quite difficult to find the resources to meet the aspirations of their constituents. So we gave them a way of not having to say no. Which meant that when we went back to them after 6 months, because we'd spent up, and we said to them, excuse me, I want public land for growing on now, they did it. They did a search of the community land that they'd got, and they gave over to the community the bits of land at the bottoms of the streets and all the rest of it that wasn't being used by anybody. It was fantastic, and they were happy. And these are some of the things that we've managed to plant up. Now, just to tell you, this one is really quite interesting, because you see that's the main road through the town. And before anybody tells me, when we don't think we can feed the town on propaganda gardens, they're only there because they are propaganda gardens, because they get people talking whether they like it or they don't. People start to say, what's that plant and what do I do with it? And then they have a chat with somebody who's next door to them that they've never met before, and suddenly you're investing in community in a way that's cost you very little. But this is quite interesting, because this was planted up very early on, in about within 6 months of us being kicking off, and it was planted up in the grounds of a derelict health centre. And the derelict health centre was the place that Harold Shipman practiced in, and Harold Shipman used to kill people. So we thought it was quite appropriate that we took over this land here and started to grow things, because it certainly started the town talking. And what happened was, very early on, we got all sorts of things. I mean, you can see bolted chard here, you know, because it took people a while. They weren't picking. But slowly they started, and this woman, who we've never met, and we've no idea who she is really, she would come every morning and pick bits and bobs for her kids' lunch box, and it was fantastic. So, you know, people got to start to, sort of got the knack of doing it. But what was really quite interesting was, nobody knew what the heck chard is in Todmorden, no idea. And we were planting lots of stuff that people didn't know, so we kind of went back to that, and we planted things that people do understand, or we get people who can't grow for toffee, like me, who produce fabulous little things that say, this is a bit of chard, or this is the traditional artichoke, or whatever. And when it looks like this, you don't pick it. And when it looks like this, you do pick it. And when you have picked it, you do this with it. Because people really haven't got much of an idea about what to do with food from the ground. And we've got some people that have turned their front gardens, which were roses and the like, into vegetable plots. And this is my mate Mary, the one that was with me when we invented the whole thing. And she took down all her walls, and she's replanted a grow your own garden. It's the bottom of a hill that leads up to an estate. And people come and they help themselves, and it's a great talking point. And other people can do that, and it doesn't cost you very much. You might just want to curse every now and again because you just were going to use that courgette for your tea, and blow me, somebody's going to take it. But anyway, you can't have everything. But here's the thing that's really interesting, and it's about a sense of belief. There is a story I always tell about this garden which just leaves me cold, because for me it says you've got to believe in people. They are magnificent. So Mary's done all this lot. It's not this lady that comes, but a younger lady with 2 children, and she walks up and down the hill. The council estate's up at the top. And she calls off with her children one day after several months of walking past it, and they start to pick leaves and bits and bobs, and they disappear up the road. A couple of hours later, kids come back and put the remains of the leaves in the compost bin. That's kind of nice, that's kind of cute, that's smashing, okay, that's fine. Next morning, a bowl of soup made from the stuff that was picked from the garden is presented on Mary's doorstep from that family to say thank you. Never met before, never spoken since, makes me go cold. That is community, that is sharing. People will do that if you give them half a chance. You've just got to get your hands off them and leave them to it.